Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first webinar of our fiscal year. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time. We are going to go ahead and kick off this briefing with our President and CEO, Stephen Chung.
Thank you, Janice. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Stephen Chung. I am the CEO for the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation and the World Trade Center Los Angeles. During the last 9 months, the LAEDC team has been working hard to create a more equitable, sustainable, and resilient economy for Los Angeles using our 5-pillar strategy for economic development. Before our team from the Institute for Applied Economics begins today's presentation, I want to give you a quick overview of our 5-pillar strategy, of which our institute is a critical component. To start, our 5-pillar strategy is designed to bring communities, organizations, and voices to the economic development table. These pillars, working together, will strengthen partnerships for an inclusive approach to shaping the future of the Los Angeles region. We'll start with the industry clusters. LAEDC engages partners across industry, government, academic institutions, nonprofits, and labor, environmental, and stakeholder groups to support the growth of industry clusters, creating resilient sectors and job opportunities. These industry clusters not only lead to the emergence of new businesses, but also facilitate the knowledge sharing and resource optimization, enabling the economy to adapt to changing markets' demands for disruption more effectively. We also have our business assistance team. Recognizing the importance of small businesses, LAEDC's Business Assistance Program provides direct technical support to help these enterprises prosper and grow. Through initiatives like Business Technical Assistance and Layoff Aversion, the LAEDC has aided various businesses, including women-owned, Black-owned, veteran-owned, and Latinx-owned enterprises, contributing to economic stability. Our workforce development team collaborates with regional educational institutions and talent development systems to create and enhance career pathways, equipping individuals with the skills needed for high-growth industries. The workforce development programs catalyze economic development by bridging the skill gaps and ensuring a skilled and adaptable talent pool, attracting businesses, encouraging investments, and driving innovation. We also focus on foreign direct investment. Through the World Trade Center Los Angeles, the LAEDC attracts international trade and foreign direct investments, leveraging resources to attract and retain global companies. International companies bring significant investments, leading to job creation and facilitating knowledge and technology transfer, making the local economy more resilient to economic fluctuations. And of course, our research. LAEDC employs data-driven research to comprehensively understand the economic landscape, guiding decision makers in policy investment choices. The research goes beyond surface-level data to delve into underlying factors that shape industries, workforce trends, and market conditions, thereby helping to uncover untapped potentials and guide targeted interventions. Part of their work includes providing these quarterly economic briefings and our annual economic forecast in February. And that's why we're so delighted that you guys are able to join us today to hear about this quarter's updated information. So with that, I'm going to pass it to the director for the Institute for Applied Economics, Shannon Sedgwick. Shannon?
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, and a warm welcome to everyone joining us today for our quarterly economic briefing, where we discuss the current state of the economy and share insights into recent developments and trends. Today, our senior economist, Justin Adams, and our economist, Dan Wei, are all joining you to go over national economic conditions, the local employment situation, including some new numbers for the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, and the local office market. Next slide, please. As we move on to the current state of the economy, I'm delighted to introduce the Institute's own senior economist, Justin Adams.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this morning for our quarterly economic briefing. So my name is Justin Adams. I'm senior economist with the Institute for Applied Economics. And as Shannon stated, I'll be walking through the national economic conditions. So I'm going to start out today's briefing by asking the question, so what happened to the recession everyone was talking about? If you cast your minds back to March of this year, you'll recall the pressure that the U.S. financial system was under caused by the relentless pace of interest rate hikes by the Federal Reserve. We saw the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, and later of First Republic Bank. And so there was fear that we could see a financial contagion similar to what preceded the Great Recession in 2007. So what happened? Next slide, please. Well, the short answer is that the US economy just sort of shrugged it off and kept motoring along. And we can see this through the most recent economic projections made by the Federal Reserve Board members and bank presidents during their June 2023 Summary of Economic Projections report. So the Federal Reserve expects continued, albeit slow, economic growth through 2023, with real GDP at 1% and unemployment at 4.1% for the year. We expect GDP to tick up slightly for 2024 and then accelerate into 2025, and expect unemployment to increase to 4.5% in 2024 and 2025, eventually settling around a 4.0% rate over the longer term. So what's important to note here, though, is that these projections for GDP and unemployment are noticeable improvements over the March 2023 projections, which saw slower growth and more people out of work. So right now we're at the point where analysts are starting to back off their calls of recession. So for example, in June, JP Morgan Chase said it no longer sees a recession happening in 2023. Earlier this month, Goldman Sachs announced that it sees a 15% chance of recession in the next 12 months. That's down from their 25% call back in July. Next slide, please. So why the optimism? Well, one reason is that the inflation numbers look a lot better. So the consumer price index shows that year-over-year inflation, which is the blue line in the chart, is running at about 3.2% as of July. Core inflation, which strips out prices for food, energy, and shelter, is also down. That's now at 2.5%. That's shown in the red line. And this suggests that the Fed's efforts to tamp down inflation have been rather effective. It should be pointed out, though, that both measures of inflation and core inflation are above the Federal Reserve's target of 2.0%. So the Fed's going to argue that there is still more work to do. Next slide, please. So looking at the federal funds rate, we see that the Fed has done a lot of work already. So the Fed has raised the federal funds rate 11 times since March of 2022, with the last increase coming in July. And right now, on a monthly average basis, it now stands at 5.33%, which is the highest it's been in 22 years. So this level actually exceeds what we saw in 2007, right before the Great Recession, when the Fed was trying, unsuccessfully, trying to slowly deflate the housing bubble. So the economy, it now looks a lot different than it did in 2007. So you can't really read too much into the fact that we have now exceeded the level in 2007, but it does give some perspective regarding the extent of the Fed's actions to date. So the Fed's going to be meeting next week, and we'll see whether they decide to increase interest rates further or take a pause. Next slide. So back to the recession question. So is it really the case that we're out of the woods now? It kind of depends on who you talk to and what metrics you look at. So one metric that the Federal Reserve Bank of New York uses is the term spread between the 10-year and 3-month Treasury rates, which has predictive power historically in terms of estimating the likelihood of a recession sometime in the next 12 months. So prior to the Fed's 2022 rate hikes, the term spread suggested a probability of recession in early 2023 was about 5%. Once the rate hikes began in earnest, though, this probability started to skyrocket, and it reached a high of 71% this past May. So 71% chance of seeing a recession in the following 12 months. Today, it's backed off a bit because of the optimism. So it's backed off to 66%, but it's an improvement, but it's still essentially a 2/3 chance that we see a recession in the next 12 months. Again, that's not a guarantee it's going to happen because these are just probabilities, but it is still a fairly high probability. And then also we should point out that, even if there is a recession, this chart has very little to say about how long it will be or how severe it might be. Next slide. So, another potential red flag comes from non-housing debt balances. So this chart shows non-housing debt balances. So that's everything, non-housing debt balance, right? So we're not including mortgages here. We're not including home equity lines of credit. But this includes auto loans, credit cards, student loans, other personal loans. And what's this chart goes back to 2003. And what's noticeable here, the growth in auto loans in red, and the growth in credit card debt in green. So credit card debt just reached $1 trillion for the first time. And there are reports that late payments are actually starting to rise. So this suggests that consumers are starting to get squeezed a little bit. And it shouldn't be surprising because while we've shown that inflation is easing, to some extent, the damage from inflation has already been done. So for example, if you look at the CPI between January 2021 and July 2023, the prices for food have increased 19% over that period. So, right, everything is just a lot more expensive. And if consumers end up pulling back on their spending as a result, then this would have serious implications for the likelihood of a recession. Next slide, please. So let me wrap up my portion of this presentation with this fun thought. So the federal government's new fiscal year begins on October 1st. Congress has not yet returned from its Labor Day break. There's no budget in place. There are 11 legislative days left to get one. And a faction of Republicans in the House is threatening to hold things up to extract concessions. So let's hope they resolve this fairly quickly so they don't add any fuel to the fire regarding the likelihood of a recession. With that, I will hand it back over to Shannon.
Thank you, Justin, for that very insightful presentation. Now we're going to switch gears and take a look at the local employment situation in Los Angeles County, covering data for the month of July.
Shannon, so sorry, this is Stephen. Before you start, I forgot to mention to the audience that there will be a Q&A session afterwards. So please enter your questions into the Q&A chat so that we can answer some of them when the presentation is done. Back to you, Shannon. Sorry about that.
Of course. Next slide, please. So the labor market continues to be relatively strong in Los Angeles County, with non-farm payroll jobs hovering around 4.6 million throughout all of 2023. Despite the hot labor summer that we've all been hearing about, non-farm payroll jobs are up by more than 100,000 over July of last year due to growth and stability in other industries. Next slide. The unadjusted unemployment rate for LA County was 5.4% in July of 2023. That's up by 0.1 percentage points from June and 0.5 percentage points over the year prior. This is the third consecutive increase since May. The US rate for August has just been released, and it ticked upward by 0.1 percentage points between July and August of 2023. The state and local rate for August will be released this Friday, and so we'll take a look to see if that follows the same trend that the US unemployment rate did this month. Next slide. Between June and July of this year, total non-farm employment in LA County fell by over 25,000 jobs. Healthcare and social assistance shows continued growth. And the summer break accounted for large declines in both private education services and local government education services, which are included in the government sector. We typically see that these jobs are added back between August and September. And the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes, they're negatively impacting jobs in the information sector. Next slide. Year over year, which we look at to take some seasonal factors into account. Los Angeles County non-farm employment increased by over 104,000. The over 27,000 jobs added in social assistance over the period ensured that healthcare and social assistance kept its top rank for yearly job growth. And food services and drinking places continued to add to payrolls to the tune of more than 23,000 jobs over last year. Information has lost a significant number of payroll jobs, again, due to the dual strikes that the entertainment industry is experiencing, and continuing year-over-year declines in manufacturing, construction, and wholesale trade employment. They still suggest the potential for a slowing in the economy. Next slide. I always like to take a look at what's happening today versus the pre-pandemic situation, just to get a better understanding of changes that have occurred and to identify the longer lasting impact on industry employment. So here we're looking at the jobs numbers in Los Angeles County for July of 2023 compared to that of July of 2019. So you see healthcare and social assistance has grown throughout the pandemic. And between July of 2019 and July of 2023, the industry has added more than 81,000 payroll jobs. Payroll jobs in food services and drinking places, which of course was one of the hardest hit industries, have finally made their recovery, exceeding monthly 2019 pre-pandemic levels since May of this year. But not all industries have been returning to past activity levels. Accommodation has never recovered to pre-pandemic levels in terms of employment. And between July of 2019 and July of 2023, the industry is still short by 7,300 payroll jobs. Next slide. Job postings data represents real-time employer demand. It can be an indicator of what may occur in the labor market. Monthly job postings in LA County have fallen below 100,000 since April of 2023. We saw that in the months of July and August combined, industries with the most job postings included professional business services, healthcare and social assistance, manufacturing, and retail. Next slide, please. The strikes in Hollywood continue with both writers and actors on strike. It represents the first dual shutdown in 63 years. So not since 1960 have both actors and writers been on strike at the same time. And it's only the second time ever in Hollywood's history. The Writers Guild of America strike began Tuesday, May 2nd, and SAG-AFTRA, Hollywood's largest union for performers and other media professionals, began their strike on July 14th. And while they're two separate unions, they share some of the same goals, namely increased residuals, minimum pay raises, and protections around using artificial intelligence. We want to share a few data points this morning to help illustrate the role that the film and television industry has in Los Angeles and its economy. Next slide, please. So we, in order to measure, we have to define. So we define the film and television industry as motion picture and sound recording, broadcasting and content providers where streamers are found, and independent artists, writers, and performers industries, which includes producers, writers, and actors. So a lot of the above the line workers on productions. So Hollywood directly employed about moving towards 200,000 people in Los Angeles County. So that was last year, annual average. It's 194,000 people in Los Angeles County that are employed within these industries. That's 4.3% of all non-farm payroll jobs in the county. Next slide, please. We often measure economic growth by the gross county product, which measures the value of goods and services produced by our county. So over the last decade, the film and television industry has directly accounted for roughly 10% of LA County's gross county product. Next slide, please. And while industry employment in LA County accounts for roughly 4% of total non-farm employment here in Los Angeles County, nationally, our industry employment in our county accounts for 22% of all payroll jobs in the industry across the US. Similarly, the film and television industry accounts for roughly 10% of our county's GCP, gross county product, but accounts for 15% of the total value of goods and services produced by the film and television industry across the US. So our highly concentrated industry is why we feel the impacts of the WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes so severely. Next slide, please. Monthly employment data for Los Angeles County through July of 2023 allows us to see the first concrete signs of the job loss associated with the work stoppage. Job losses in the industry started to show as soon as the WGA strike went into effect. 5,300 jobs in the industry were immediately shed in May. And as the WGA strike continued and the SAG-AFTRA strike began, job loss increased. So combined losses in May, June, and July of this year reached 11,800 direct employees. Now, non-employer firms and independent contractors will represent additional losses, but data is not available as it's only reported annually. New local employment figures for August will be released this Friday and should give us even more insight on the number of payroll jobs disrupted by the dual strikes. And of course, the economic cost of these strikes, they're not just limited to the industry itself. It's more than just lost wages for writers, actors, and other production workers. The more production is impacted, the more businesses in the industry supply chain will be affected. And the ripple effect of reduced spending from workers in the industry and the supply chain, well, that represents additional revenue losses in our region as they're not spending. As with any work stoppage, you'll only truly understand the impact that it has on our economy once it's done. So the duration is really key in determining the total economic impact that this these dual strikes will have on our Los Angeles County economy. So the longer they continue, the more it will hurt our local economy. Next slide. Now I'm going to pass it along to our economist, Dan, who will be covering our local office market. Dan?
Thank you, Shannon, and also thank you, Justin, for the very insightful presentation, which provide us the big pictures about the current economic conditions and driving influences for both the national and local economies. So what I'm going to do next is to talk a little bit more about the current conditions of the office market in our county. Next slide, please. Okay, so currently the office sector in the county is facing challenges in the post-pandemic era. So the office vacancy rate, looking at the chart on this slide, we can see that the vacancy rate remained relatively stable at about 14% before the pandemic. However, when the pandemic hit, the economic downturn has led to a sharp increase in office vacancies between 2020 and 2022. So the vacancy rate reached to 21.3% in the third quarter last year. So this is about 1.5 times the pre-pandemic level. The high vacancy rate of the office space has persisted currently due to factors such as the current trends to remote and hybrid working schedules. And many businesses and companies, they are reevaluating their office space requirements and considering downsizing office footprints. And some other economic uncertainties, including high inflation rates and also the rising interest rates, which potentially increase the cost of capital, also contribute to the challenges faced by the office market in the county. Next slide, please. So if we look at the office market in the county, we can see from this chart that the distribution of vacancy rates is quite uneven across the submarkets. So in the second quarter this year, the highest vacancy rate occurred in East Downtown at about 46%. Some other submarkets are doing much better, such as in mid-counties and also in San Gabriel Valley. But these two submarkets collectively only accounts for about 7% of the total net rentable area in the county. Some of the largest submarkets, such as the West Los Angeles area and the downtown area, they are currently seeing a vacancy rate between 20 and 25%. Next slide, please. Okay, so in terms of the asking rental rates, the average rate was about $4 per square feet per month in the second quarter. So this represents a new record high. So despite the high listing, as well as the high vacancy rates, the property landlords have been able to maintain relatively stable asking rents by offering quite generous concession packages in order to attract tenants and to boost the leasing activities. So you can see from this chart, among the submarkets in the county, West LA stood as having the highest average asking rent rate at $5.44, followed by downtown LA area. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so if we look more specifically for the downtown area, in addition to the previously mentioned high vacancy rate, there are also some other indicators of some distress in the downtown office market. So as shown here, there are some office properties undergone foreclosures due to missed payments and defaults. And also, in addition to these foreclosures and defaults, as listed on this slide as well, we can see some major high-profile office building sales in the downtown area in the past year, which include the 700,000 square feet Union Bank Plaza, as well as the over 1 million square feet Aeon Center, Figueroa at Wilshire office building, as well as historic buildings such as Pac Mutual and also the Trust building on Spring Street. One more thing to point out is that many of these office buildings hit the market at a much lower price than their previous sale price. So this is an indication of declined value of the office properties in the local commercial real estate market. So let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so despite several indicators we just saw signify a weak office market at present in the county, there are actually still some potential positive signs that may indicate a positive improvement in the market condition, hopefully in the next couple of years. So first of all, although many companies, they are delaying making significant real estate decisions, based on the statistic in the second quarter this year, new lease agreements actually made up 60% of the overall leasing activity. So this represents some positive sign that there's still some underlying demand for office space to some extent. And secondly, the construction of office spaces in the county has shown some resiliency. So currently there are 27 office properties with 3.1 million square feet of spaces under construction, mainly in the Tri-Cities, Glendale, and West LA areas. So this basically represents about 1% of the total office inventory. And then thirdly, the market for adaptive reuse show some potentials. So this refers to the conversion of underutilized office spaces into residential units. So this is a very effective strategy that can help to address both the housing needs in the county and to repurpose the underutilized office space. So based on the findings in a recently completed study by the Rand Corporation, if all the identified underutilized properties, so this would include not only the underutilized office spaces, but also other other commercial properties, if all of those identified underutilized spaces were converted into housing, then they could potentially account for about 9 to 14% of the total housing needs in our county over the next 8 years. So as a summary, although many indicators as we saw today signify challenges in the office market in LA, especially in the downtown area, there are still some promising perspectives that worth highlighting, such as the increased proportion of new lease agreements, the construction projects and the proposed projects in the pipeline, as well as the huge potential of adaptive reuse. So as the region adapts and evolves in the post-pandemic environment, it is very important for us to continue monitoring the market conditions and also understand the challenges, as well as to identify potential opportunities for the recovery of the commercial real estate market. So with that, I will hand it back to Shannon.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And Shannon will be jumping on with me as well. We're now going to be moving towards our Q&A session, and I'm glad that we have a number of different questions. I'm going to jump into one of the second question that came from Debbie Gofarb, asking whether we're going to get a copy of the slides. We will be posting not only the recording for this session, as well as a slide on our website, so it'll be available after the presentation. So please be on the lookout. Go to LAEDC.org, and you'll be able to access both the slides and this recording. Shannon, I'm going to direct the first question from Michael Curley that asks, manufacturing continues to see challenges both in jobs and retaining this industry in California. Incentives are not having as much impact either. not so much a question, but I see a question there. What is happening with the manufacturing sector? You've shown in the slide that there's been a decline even after the COVID pandemic, but it seems like this has been the trend that's been going on throughout the United States. Can you talk a little bit more about the future of manufacturing in Southern California?
Sure. So manufacturing jobs have been on a long-term decline, and that's partly because the industry is shifted away from being labor intensive into being more capital intensive. So you've seen a lot of um, more advanced machinery and automation come into play. And so if you're looking at just jobs, it seems to tell a negative story. When you factor in productivity and output, which are revenues associated with the industry, it really tells you that it's just the employment that is waning, that the industry still represents a large source or a large potential and contributes to the economy pretty significantly, especially here in Los Angeles County. So that's been what's been happening. We also saw that during the pandemic, the downsides of having widespread global supply chains were an issue. So there's been some conversation about what reshoring, nearshoring would look like. And so those conversations take a long time for them to actually take effect. So we might see some additional interest in siting manufacturing operations here to have direct access to our massive local market and also our San Pedro Bay ports. And so it remains to be seen how much of that actually translates into growth in the future.
Thank you, Shannon. And it's interesting as you're mentioning about the transitioning of the global manufacturing base, right? We've been hearing a lot about nearshoring and onshoring for a long time, but after COVID, because the disruption of the supply chain now becomes a risk management decision, that some companies choose to have at least a portion of their manufacturing closer to Los Angeles and in the United States to ensure that they don't have this disruption in case anything else happen in the future that would disrupt our supply chain. Moving to the next question from anonymous attendee. This person said, are there also high vacancy rates outside of the downtown area? Meaning, are some businesses just moving from the downtown area as a part of changes from the pandemic? I think there was a slide that demonstrated that when it came to the office vacancy rate by submarket, besides East Downtown LA, the Tri-Cities and Glendale area has 19.5%. Hollywood Wilshire Corridor has 21%. South Bay has 24%. West LA has 19.5%. Dan and Shannon, can you talk a little bit more about these sub-regions? Is this normal, the 20% around vacancy rates, or is this abnormal?
So for the downtown area, definitely this is an increase of vacancy rates compared to the pre-pandemic level. And for the other submarket, especially the East Downtown area, this is mainly the high rates is mainly due to the pretty high, over 50% vacancy rate in the historical core and fashion district. For the other submarkets, they are doing better compared to East Downtown and downtown areas such as the San Gabriel Valley and some other spaces. So there's potential that companies may reevaluate their office requirements and maybe considering moving their office spaces to other locations, depends on the asking rates and other considerations. But right now, I think more and more tenants, they have higher requirements in terms of the quality of the office space provided, especially those that are very friendly, provide great amenity to their workers, their employees. So that will attract more workers to, coming back to the office.
I do want to highlight that the transition from office space in terms of the vacancy rates is also having an impact on a lot of small businesses, restaurants and bars, kind of locally supportive industries and companies that are supporting the office workers. And because there's such a high vacancy rate in certain areas, this is actually having an impact on those businesses as well. Going to another question from Eduardo Martinez. I know that Shannon, you answered Eduardo already on the chat, but I want to bring it up for the group as well. The question is the expectation that whenever the strikes are concluded, that there will be an uptick of television and movie production to make up for the time that production was sidelined? And also, is there a risk that some of the backlog will go to other areas like Atlanta and Toronto? I'm going to add my own question to that as well. When it comes to, you're mentioning the complexity of our entertainment industry for film and television, besides just basically making the movies, there's also a lot of post-production work. So even after you're able to pick up the filming again, that backlog in terms of the post-production work, is it all going to stay here? Or is it going to go out elsewhere? What's the risk of kind of the job opportunities and the business opportunities leaving this region? Shannon?
Yeah, so we're seeing a decline in, if we're looking at shoot days, we're seeing in Los Angeles County levels that we haven't seen since the pandemic. And so what that tells us is the true impact of what the strikes are having on the industry. So during the pandemic, everything was delayed, and what we experienced was kind of an uptick in activity all throughout 2022, trying to work through this backlog. It's a little bit of a different situation this time, and so there isn't the expectation that that same thing will occur. And in fact, the longer the strike goes on, it really is complex. So the longer the strike goes on, we're really at risk of losing these productions altogether here. And another kind of layer is even our California film and television tax credit. Once you're awarded a credit, you have a window where you have to start filming. And so right now, these productions that have been granted, the preliminary credit are now having to go through the process of getting basically an extension or a stay for filming, because they don't know when they can film it. So the longer it goes on, the more complex actually bringing your projects on become. And so the expectation is not that something similar will happen. The expectation is that we were already seeing Hollywood kind of slowing for other reasons. And this additional layer of the strikes, when you're missing these scheduled productions, we're just going to miss a handful, not more than a handful. We're just going to miss some productions in general. They're just going to pass them over.
Let's hope both strikes come to a resolution soon, because having that kind of impact to this region is going to be devastating, especially as we're just climbing out of the pandemic. And the other thing you mentioned earlier in your slides is that LA County has about 22% of all the jobs for entertainment throughout the entire nation. And because of that concentration of those jobs here, a lot of the work, a lot of the companies, they want to produce here because you have the talent base to do that work. But the longer these folks are not working here, there's a likelihood that they're not going to stay here or transition to other industries, which is going to make our industry, our entertainment industry, less robust and less competitive. So let's hope that they can come to a resolution soon. There's another question about, sorry, Shannon, you're going to.
One last piece. I don't think people really understand when you're looking at foreign jurisdictions that are also offering tax credits to attract business there. I don't think you really understand how much of their activity are US productions that are just going there to capitalize on it. So the second part of the question, are we at risk of losing some of that? That's always a risk, even without the strikes.
And I don't want to dwell on this too much, but you and I had different conversations before, and it's always fascinating to me to learn the complexity of the types of companies that are affected. One of the things I didn't realize is by the actors going on strike, and I just thought that it's going to impact the filming. What I didn't also realize is that red carpet events and those companies that does the step and repeat in the red carpet themselves, photographers, they're all going to be impacted. So the entertainment industry and the Hollywood industry just has such such a huge magnitude of influence over the entire economy as a whole. So again, let's hope that we can resolve it. There's another question here about advertising revenue. Do we have any data on the advertising revenue? Specifically, how will college football and NFL impact negotiation? Shannon, I'm not sure whether this is a question that we're able to address at this point because I don't think we have the numbers. However, we did last year do a report, and now we're working on the second one on collegiates and also some of our sports entertainment side. Any insight you can shed on that?
Yeah, and I think the question might be asking a little bit about commercials and while I'm not sure about the advertising revenue side, what I can tell you is that commercials had always been kind of a buoy for us. So when we had some disruptions in the entertainment industry, we still had a pretty strong commercial segment. But we've been seeing that start to decline in our region. And so it doesn't represent the same kind of stability, and that's in terms of producing these commercials. So not exactly answering the question that you asked, but did want to kind of share that little insight there. We would have to take a look at if there's any data in terms of advertising and get back to you on that. So.
Jonathan Diaz asks, how do these economic indicators present an opportunity for the Los Angeles County region to pivot and adapt in areas like economic and workforce development? Not really a specific research question, so I think this is open to any of the team members that want to jump in. I'll jump in as well as soon as we get some initial response. Shannon, team? No, I'll add my piece to this. I do think that there's a huge opportunity for workforce development and talent development adapting. As we're looking at some of the sectors that are growing, as Shannon's slides indicated, that after COVID, there's certain sectors that continue to grow and recover, including healthcare and social assistance and professional business services, compared to wholesale trade and manufacturing that lost jobs over the period of COVID and beyond. I think this is where we can work very closely with our community colleges, with our Cal State universities, with our university system. Los Angeles having such a robust system, we definitely have the opportunity to make sure that we're able to identify the displaced workers, make sure that they have the upskilling opportunities to enter the workforce and enter a career path that's high paying and provide a stable career path moving forward. And identifying those particular industries that are position to grow and provide high wages. That's what we need to concentrate our efforts for economic and workforce development as well. So separating economic and workforce development, we need to do more to attract those industries that can bring us those entrepreneurship and workforce opportunities. And from a workforce development, we need to make sure that our education and talent development system is well connected with industry, so that as you're training the next generation of workers, whether they're young workers or whether they're adult workers that have been in the workforce that are now looking to transition to other career paths, that once they're done with those training, they actually have a job. Because sometimes once you're done with training, it's not guaranteed that you're going to be able to enter this new career path. So whether it's internship and apprenticeship opportunities are going to be very, very important. So there are many, many things that this region, and that's why, many things that this region can do. And that's why LAEDC, I was mentioning earlier, with our 5-pillar approach, is really focused on economic and workforce development transition to make sure that our industry partners, as well as our academic partners, nonprofits, community-based organization, labor, environmental, all these partners are able to come together to really help us shape the future together. So hopefully that answers your question, Jonathan. We're going to move to Marilyn Simpson, who's asking, what types of incentives would you suggest for local agencies to offer? Shannon, Dan, Justin, any thoughts?
Well, I'm guessing, if we are relating that back to what's happening with the dual strikes in Hollywood, um, there are strike funds that can help assist some of the direct workers who are not earning a salary, not earning a paycheck. And so the ones that will be struggling are going to be the businesses that are impacted in the supply chain. So taking a look at who those businesses might be within your jurisdiction, understanding the challenges they face, they might be the ones that would most benefit from some type of incentive program.
Justin, I see you coming off mute.
Yeah, I mean, it's a broad question, but there are incentives to help workers. There have to be incentives to help businesses as well, especially like small businesses that are struggling to make their way through, especially in the movie and television industry. So a lot of that assistance or those incentives, it's financial, capital assistance, and then actually a lot of technical assistance to help make sure that the companies are actually poised to take advantage of money to help with their cash flow.
And Marilyn, I want to also highlight that the LAEDC partners with LA County, especially with the Department of Economic Opportunity, as well as City of Los Angeles and various cities across the Los Angeles region. And one of the things that we were working together with them is to identify during COVID, when smaller companies and small businesses are going through their challenges, what services are available. And the county and the cities have been very responsive for creating programs. And as Shannon was mentioning, as we're looking at the potential impact for these small businesses for during the strike, we're now identifying potential opportunities for the county to provide additional supports and the various regions to provide additional supports for these small companies that are going to be looking at the long-term impact of not having the same type of opportunities available as before. So please look at our website. Our business assistance team is able to offer additional technical assistance, as Justin was saying, as a part of our partnership with the county and the various cities throughout Los Angeles. I think we have time for one last question, which there's a question about any downstream economic impact and identified for adaptive reuse of office space to apartments. And I think there was a follow-up conversation about that. The downstream impact prior to Olympic events have been identified, so we can pay attention to those businesses prior to the Olympic Games here. Dan, you want to answer that question about the
yeah, in terms of the adaptive reuse, to my knowledge, I have not so far seen an economic impact analysis for the conversion projects, but there have been some market research, and also there are research conducted by Rent Corporation and UC Berkeley to look at from both the architectural and financial standpoints, the challenges of those conversion projects, especially, when the major issue is about, converting those structures physically, and also need to meet some special standards for, residential units that will cost the conversion projects. And this really depends on the type of properties that we're converting, whether it is office space or it's hotels, motels, or any other types of commercial properties. And also it depends on the size of, like the apartments, whether it's a studio or it's just 2 bedroom apartments. So it really depends on the type of properties and their conversion and the size of the residential units being converted.
Thank you, Dan. And we have a lot more questions that we can get to. So we thank you for the audience for joining us today for our quarterly economic briefing. Want to remind everybody that we have a lot of other events that we would love to engage you with. Our next event is the Future of Bioscience, which is one of our future forum series on October 19th. And please come to our website to find out what the location is. Also, we'll be celebrating our 28th annual Eddy Awards on November 8th in the afternoon, in the evening, actually. We're going to be doing it once again at the SoFi Stadium. For those who joined us last year, we're able to be on the field, and it was an amazing night of celebration of economic development activities throughout this entire region. So we hope you can join us. Please find more information on laedc.org/events, and our webinar and our slides will be posted. Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Justin. Thank you, the entire IAE team, for this insightful presentation. And we look forward to having you join us next time in our quarterly briefing. Thank you so much, and good to see you all.
Thank you, everyone.